Welcome to this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live, the show which ensures that you profit from your time spent here with experts, either through their industry insights, information, or simply learning from them. And today we have Kit Sadgrove. He is the author of a new book called The Concierge Class, and we'll talk about all that and learn all about the unseen group of middle class fixers, as he called them, who work for corporations and ultra wealthy. Welcome to the show, Kit.
Thank you very much, AJ. I'm honored to be here.
You are welcome. Welcome to the show, Kit. Welcome to India in this online form. And I'm sure not just in India, but a lot of people across the globe will benefit from what we are going to talk right now. We'll talk about inside. In this backdrop, we'll have our conversation inside the modern power structure, the concierge class that you talk about. We'll talk about all that. But let's first talk about you, Kit, a bit about your background, your journey, so that the audience learns a bit more about who they are listening to.
Thank you, AJ. So I have been on a journey for many years to try to understand why there is a growing gap between the extremely rich and the corporations on one side and the rest of us on the other. So we are now at a position where the gap between the very rich and the rest of us is at a level not seen since the Edwardian era in 1900s, 1910s. And I've been trying to understand why this has happened and perhaps who is responsible. So I've spent time reading books and reading papers and talking to experts and professionals. And I've come to the conclusion that there is a responsibility that lies with a group called the concierge class. And I could talk more about this. For me,
Yes,
for myself, I have, I'm a business person. So I am definitely not anti-business. I have a business as a run a home study course business where we teach people new skills to become self-employed. So for example, AJ, if you wanted to become a copywriter or you wanted to become a foot hair healthcare specialist, or indeed many other trades and professionals, then you could come to us, and it's called the Blackfoot Center, and you can find us on Google. But at the background of this, I've been thinking about why we have this gulf, that people are finding that although they're at work, their money is achieving less than it used to maybe 10 or 20 years ago. And at the same time, the wealth is going to the ultra rich and the corporations. And I say this is the responsibility of a group of middle class professionals called the concierge class.
Absolutely, Kit. Absolutely. Let's understand this. You said you are into business, so you're not anti-business. You have written, and it is the concierge class.
Yeah.
But if you look at it from that point of view, wasn't it since the early ages when there used to be kings, their people, some of them, they were very rich. They used to help them in keeping the command over, all the taxes and everything. And they helped the king to be, in that position. And the army and everyone else, whichever as per the position, they all took the spoils of power. And it was the common man, common person who used to be, ruled, as well as they used to pay for all the luxuries as well as all the taxes in the good way or the bad way. Later on, it was the working class which always provided, and that support to the people who were, as they called it, the factors of production during those times. And now technology has been added to those factors of production. And now you can say AI. How would you like to look at it from that point? Is it something new? Is it something different? Isn't this the way human existence has been since time immemorial?
There is always a tendency, if you're making money, to want to keep more of it. But if you are very rich, yes, you also have a responsibility to the community. So there is the rights of the individual and there are the rights of the community. So from the end of the Second World War up till about 1979, the gap between the rich and poor was slowly declining because there was social benefits, countries were getting richer, and in general, the corporations recognized that they had a responsibility to their staff and to their customers, as well as to their shareholders. But since about 1979, for various reasons, the world has turned in favor of corporations and the ultra rich. And many of the laws that have been put in place around the world have been slowly pushed back. So civil rights, the rights of having trades unions to protect you if you were at work, and so on, some of these have been rolled back. And also, as technology has come along, and the ability of some companies to make huge amounts of money has grown, and at the same time, individuals' earning power has declined. So we now have a situation whereby people in work in many countries, to take a nurse, for example, who's doing an important job, but they now find themselves going to a food bank because they don't have enough money to put food on the table. And that really is a disgrace in a world where there is a lot of money. And so what has happened is that the ultra rich have gained increasing monopoly power, and they have now called upon this unseen army, the concierge class, to help them avoid paying taxes and keep more money for themselves and push back the rights of employees and push back the rights of citizens. And it could sound a bit like a conspiracy theory, but the facts actually bear this out, that the rich are getting richer and all the rest of us, AJ, are not sharing in that wealth. And that's a very sad state of affairs. And I tell you why, because if you're a working person, as you are and as I am, and we see that somehow governments are not achieving the things that we need, that we're not earning enough money, and the social welfare is not good enough, and our job is precarious, and maybe we're at risk of having our company being closed down if we're working for a company and being moved to a cheaper place, perhaps. And we begin to say, this liberal democracy is not working for me. And so you look around and you find there are kind of strong men who come along, it's mostly men, who say, democracy is not working. I can make this work. I'll sweep away all this red tape and make the world a better place. But the trouble is, after 5 or 10 years of these people being in place, you find that it's not working because there are iron laws of economics. And so people are sometimes led to believe that there are easier solutions and that democracy is not the solution. And that's the risk we find we're heading into. And that's, I believe, because of the concierge class, who are complicit in helping the ultra rich and the corporations evade their social responsibilities.
Right. So is it something new? The concierge class was always there. Maybe the technology has changed. The mode of service delivery to the powerful people may have changed, but it's always existed since long
It
long
has,
ago.
it has existed. And various rulers have been kinder or more aware of their responsibilities. And in other cases, they have been more ruthless. And so as time has gone by, and as democracy has evolved, and as ordinary people have got the vote, people then said, we need to have controls over monopolies, because if you have a monopoly, then you can put the price up. So if you are a drug company, for example, you're the only person who has a drug that people need, you can charge whatever you want if there are no controls. And if you are a company that keeps on buying up smaller businesses whenever they pop up, and so eventually, if you are like Google, where you just keep on buying up new companies and stopping any competition, then that's not good for society. So the role of government, as society has evolved and as democracy has evolved, is to try and create a balance between the rights of the individual to earn lots of money and the need of society. And those needs are to put police officers on the streets and to put teachers into classrooms and to mend potholes in the roads and to provide a level of social welfare, a safety net for people who have fallen on bad times. Has this always happened? Yes, in the past it has, but democracy tells us that we need safety nets and we need to have taxes paid. So you pay tax, I pay tax, and we pay tax according to how much money we have. But then you find that the very rich have ways and means in the recent years of evading those responsibilities. So yes, it always has been the case that the rich will try and avoid their responsibilities, and now they're much more able to do this now.
Right. Is the problem with old money or is the problem with new money, Kit? Which is the bad, good one, or which is not so good one, and which is the bad one? How do you look at it? Because if you look at human nature itself, Kit, everyone wants to earn because they work hard. The great American dream that you talk about, they want to earn and they don't want to give it away. They might donate a bit, but they want to leave it to their to their sons and daughters and whoever they want. Inheritance.
Yes.
Likewise, but and everyone wants to keep the kings and queens always wanted their rule to flourish for as many since forever and ever till the end of time. The same
Yes.
would anyone who has money, they would want to pass on because it is not allowing, the laws of nature are not allowing them to pass it into their next birth. By the time they discover it, you will not see them passing it to anyone else, but to passing themselves, and accessing that account in the next birth. But as of now, human mind is like that. What's wrong with people wanting to continue to remain rich, use the present system until unless something is illegal? How do you look at it from your point of view?
That's a good question, AJ. None of us really want to pay our taxes. Very few people will willingly do that. And that's really why we have a government that says from each according to our ability to pay and to each according to our needs. So the question is, should people be allowed to keep their money, and how much of their money should they be allowed to keep? And people think, this person, Jeff Bezos, he's a very clever man and he works very hard. And the guy who runs Facebook and the guy who runs Microsoft. But actually, you look at these people, how much of it is actually their work, their cleverness? So you find that very often these people have come from very rich families and they rarely admit this. But you find that people like Bezos and so on have gone to very expensive private schools and gone to expensive universities in America. And this is not through their own doing. This is because they've been supported by their rich parents. And here's the other thing about risk. For example, if you're a rich person and you say, I'm going to take a risk, and if you fail, it doesn't really matter so much. If you're a poor person, you make a risk, then life could be catastrophic. You could lose your house. So I give you an example. Let's say you are Stelios, who runs EasyJet, for example, a worldwide airline. So was he clever in setting up that airline? Well, sure he was. But you know what? His parents owned a Greek shipping line. Now, my parents don't own a Greek shipping line, and your parents, I'm sure, AJ, don't own a shipping line. So some people have advantages, and they were given a step up. And if you don't have that advantage, if your parents don't give you money to buy a house when you're young, then that money stays in the family. So, for example, in the UK, the landowners you asked about, has this always been the case? Much of the land is owned by people who came over. They were captains in the army of William the Conqueror, and William said, you did a good job defeating the Saxons, so I'm going to give you all of this land. And this land is still in the same ownership of people who actually have done nothing except get tenant farmers on the land, and the tenant farmers pay the rich person. So there is a lot of inequality. Still, some of it is the old rich and some of it is the new rich. But it is the responsibility of government to ensure that we have movement across society, because otherwise the rich stay rich and the poor stay poor and everyone else stays in the middle. So that is a responsibility of government. And of course, people try and evade taxes, and government has to ensure that we all pay according to our means.
Right. And the governments are not doing. Let's look at, you can talk about democracy, but let's look at other examples even in political systems, look around, you will find that even in closed systems, people want to be in power.
Yes, they
Either
do.
you can call it, and they have used their power, used their might by changing, the systems there, and also changing the tenure. If the constitution allows for 2 terms, it has gone towards many terms beyond that. And everywhere in the world, you see this is whole concept that is changing. So which is, you if you say democracy, people say this is the best thing that of you that is available as of now. Other systems are also not working. What is the best system that is available? Secondly, I will come to the concierge part and your book also,
Yeah.
Kate. But I want to understand in terms of, if you look at Elon Musk, he said, listen, I am not keeping money to myself. I want to save humanity, humanity's extinction. I will take
Yeah.
them to Mars so that we become a multi-planetary species. Others will say, listen, I brought this artificial
Yeah.
intelligence so that you can use it and you can have enough free time, and, and you sit back and relax with your families. Also,
Yes.
suppose if these people didn't have money, everyone gets distributed this amount of money which these people have. Do you think they will work? What is the incentive for people to work if they cannot live a good life themselves and pass on the whole thing about good life to the people that they love their most, that is their families, their sons, their daughters, and whoever they want? How do you look at this? Is all human. Even animals, they save their own species and their old children. Why
Yes.
why why should not it be like that, right?
Indeed so. Indeed so. So, AJ, you asked about different types of government. And I recall a saying by Winston Churchill, which is that democracy is the worst of all systems apart from all the others. So, yeah, there are many other systems of government, but they tend not to be to the advantage of the rich. We've seen this in Russia, for example, after the fall of the Soviet Union, where a few people were basically given businesses at cut price, cut rate prices, and have benefited from this ever since. So yes, democracy is a bad system, but everything else is even worse. And so the question you then raised is, shouldn't people be able to keep their money? And of course they should be able to. I want to keep my money. I want to pass my money on to my children and my grandchildren, and that's a human thing. The question is, governments have a responsibility to ensure redistribution as well, because otherwise, as I mentioned in Britain, the rich have all this land that they just pass on generation after generation. And someone who is maybe a poor tenant farmer never has the opportunity to actually own anything and pass their money on to their children. So yeah, there is a thing called redistribution, and that is really important because that's the only way that talent will really come to the fore. And every country needs talent. We need talented individuals. But if you're a poor person, you will never achieve that. So maybe you live in a very poor part of the city and you don't have the advantage of having small classes, and you don't have good health because maybe it's very polluted where you live. And so government has to, and by government, I mean us, ordinary people, have to vote in a way that ensures that, sure, people keep a percentage of their profit and but pass on other money to the state, which is us, which means that, yeah, the potholes get mended and the children get educated properly and that we all have equal access. But if the rich keep all the money to themselves, as is happening, then you have an unfair society and a society that people begin to mistrust. And we see revolutions around the world where people are mistrustful of democracy and they're looking for quick and easy answers. And then you find that the strong men start to find scapegoats, and they say, well, it's not working. It's got to be the immigrants, or it's got to be people of color, or it's got to be some other work shy people who are not interested in working, and so on. And then you get mistrust, and then society begins to fall apart. So yeah, people need to keep their money, but we also need to ensure that there is a level of redistribution, AJ.
Absolutely. And so why is it not happening? Why is the government for the people, by the people, of the people in democracies still not able to do it? The problem remains. The rich are getting, so-called rich are getting richer.
And I believe, AJ, this is because of the concierge class. Now, this is a concept that I've been working on for many years, and it's not a concept that's widely understood. And I think it deserves to have a wider airing. And thank you for allowing me to come to talk today. There is an unseen army of middle class professionals who basically do the bidding of the ultra rich and the corporations to manipulate society into a way that suits them and allows them to keep all their money. And I would suggest that there are 4 different categories of the concierge class. And that's kind of useful to know because it tells us that they exist across all sectors of middle class society. And I guess that many of your listeners, AJ, may think, am I a member of the concierge class? So let me tell you. So we've got 4 groups. I call them the MEPs, that is to say, the magicians and the enablers and the pushers and the suppliers. And if you think there is any relationship between that and the drug industry, that's to say illegal drugs, then you'd have to make up your own mind about that. But I could tell you a bit about these different categories and what professions you find them in, if that would help.
Yes, yes, please.
So the magicians, these are people who can magically make your profits disappear if you want them to. So imagine, AJ, you're a really, really rich person and you're sitting by the poolside of your swimming pool and you pick up the phone and you say, hey, Kit, hey, listen, I make a lot of money, but I don't really want to pay taxes. Why should I have to pay any taxes? Taxes are just for the little people, aren't they? So can you make sure I don't have to pay any taxes? And I say, sure, boss, I can do that. I can basically put all your money into tax havens in Barbados where you don't have to pay tax, and it would just be a pretend company. It's just a letterbox company. It doesn't really exist. It's just on paper. And that company will then be owned by a company in St. Lucia, and that company in turn is owned by a company in Barbados or Bermuda or the British Virgin Isles where there's no tax. And the authorities won't be able to work out what we're doing, and you will be able to keep all your money, AJ. It's very simple. So yes, there are lawyers and there are accountants who spend their entire life basically helping the ultra rich and the corporations evade paying taxes. And that means that children have classes that are far too big and teachers that are overburdened, and there are potholes in the roads and there's too little social welfare. That's the magicians. They can also do other things. They can, if you want, they can make your profits look bigger. So if you are I don't know, Donald Trump, and you need to borrow some money, you need to prove you actually have a lot of money, and I can make it look like you've got more money by bringing forward revenue that doesn't actually exist yet, and I can inflate the value of the buildings that you own and make it look like you're richer than you are. That's the magicians. There's also the enablers. So let's say, AJ, you're a very rich person and you're sitting by the pool and you give me a ring and you say, Kit, so listen, I hear that the government is going to pass some laws that say I've got to take care of my employees and give them paternity leave and let trades unions operate and stuff. I don't want any of that to happen because that limits what I'm doing. And Kit, what are you going to do about that for me? And I say, AJ, I can fix that. Many of the politicians in the government, they owe you a favor because, you're a big employer, and I'll whisper in their ear and say, you don't want to pass this legislation. It's not in the interest of AJ and the other rich people. There's all kinds of enablers who make the world good for the rich. And then there is the pushers. And so these are people who are owning newspapers and websites. So Jeff Bezos now owns the Washington Post, And X, formerly Twitter, is owned by Elon Musk, and he has all his followers, and he pumps out all these ideas that benefit him and rich people. But there's many other people. There's economists. You think economists with all their algebra and their equations, they must understand the way of the world. But actually, as John Maynard Keynes said, any economist who thinks they are not into politics is actually enthralled to some long dead classical economics economist. So yes, there are all kinds of people. There are scientists who produce reports that say, yeah, producing oil is actually a good thing. You know, it's not, it doesn't cause pollution and it doesn't cause climate change. I mean, this happens. You know, the cigarette companies used to do this. The oil companies have done this, and so on. The lobbyists, there's any amount of lobbyists who are pumping out ideas that people hear that say we should support the rich and the corporations. And finally, there are the suppliers, and the suppliers come in various categories. I'll give you one example. Let's say you're a freelancer, and let's say you want work. And so you go to one of these platforms like Upwork, and I put a job on Upwork and I find there's 30 people want this job. And I say, yeah, I'll hire you, right? It's like the Edwardian times. You go down to the dockside and you stand by the gates, and the gang master comes out and says, you, and you, yeah, we're going to hire you, you and you, and the rest of you can just go home. So there are many examples of situations where there are people who need a job, but they have very little control over it. You think about delivery companies, people like Deliveroo and Uber, taxi drivers who now are maybe trying to get slightly more control over their lives. But this is an example of where there's a very few people are having a lot of control over people who have to do a lot of work to earn very little money. So those are the four categories, and I have a set of lists and diagrams that show all the professions and trades that people are in. Your listeners may well be in one of them, and so it kind of almost leads on to the question as to is any of your listeners responsible for some of the ills of the world? And if so, are there things they can do to make the world better? Can they take responsibility for the work they do? And that's a big challenge.
Right, that's a big challenge. But before we come to these groups who are helping those people, don't people need jobs? What options do they have got? When you start studying economics, that time you don't think about, that you have to help someone. You have all the good intentions at that point in time. When you get into law school, everyone does not look at it that way. You want to get good clients, but you don't look at it that way, that you have to become a tool in the hands of somebody, few people. But as you grow, as you go up in life, as you see life closely, you know, uh, you see the realities of life. You need a good quality of life for yourself, your children, your family. What is the option here? How do they? A lot of people, you see, that is why this whole culture of startups have also come up. That they want to work hard and create something, have money. But those people whom you talk about being powerful with lot of money, they have created a structure. Everyone would want to create a structure. A lot of people would want to go to the retire at 30, go to a beach, live there. People have that aspiration. So I want to understand what is the solution here, Kit. What can one do about it? If professionals don't work, there will be other people, or another other people. Means one or the other, all these enablers, pushers, and magicians and suppliers will be there for them. It has been since ages. It's been long back. It will be. It is today. Technology is helping them in a different manner, and technology is also helping common people. And if you look at the pushback from society, if you can call it, look at it that way, you see the United Healthcare case. Them that may not be the ideal example, but the way it has happened, But ironically, you see, the one the one who had the gun comes from a wealthy background, and the one who is a victim here, somebody here, he comes from a he came from a very different background. He rose up the ranks. People are supporting the one who had the gun. It's a different world. It's very difficult, very confusing for a common person to understand what is good, what is right. It is indeed a very I want to understand, get a sense of what is the solution here, kid, for a common person to explain. Should I leave work? Should I do it? How do I know whether I'm enabling or I'm just doing my work here?
Absolutely, absolutely, AJ. And I think one of the things you mentioned as well is if I leave, if I go away, someone else will take my job. Someone else will do the work. And this is, in a way, this is a bit like saying I can sell cocaine to children, because if I don't, then someone else will come along. And so clearly that's, people who would argue that's not a great argument. So that leads us on to, what are our responsibilities to society at work? One thing I would say about work, by the way, is that you think about some professions that people think they're well paid. So take lawyers. The lawyers have always been a very good job to do. You go to law school and then you go and work for a law company. But actually what you find now is that lawyers and accountants, they're on the clock, and they're judged by how many hours they've billed this day, this week, and this month. And if you don't perform, then you could get sacked. And also, these law companies getting larger and larger, and there are fewer of them, so there's less competition. There are only, 6 major law firms in the world, and they're in every major city. And they're taking increasingly control over the lawyers who work for them. And so the individual lawyers are actually making less money. The same is true of accountants as well. There are a few superstar lawyers, a few superstar accountants, but most of them actually are probably making less money than they used to, because the big corporations are taking over. If you take vets, for example, there was a time when in your average town, there was a vet, and the vet was highly respected and looked after the the cattle on your little farm, or looked after your puppy dog. Nowadays, these veterinary practices are being bought up by the corporations, and the same thing is happening. The vets have less control, and they're being told by the corporations to sell this drug and that drug, and make sure this animal has this treatment and that treatment to make more money, and so on. So these professions that were once so highly respected, people are suffering. But anyway, to get back to the question that you asked, which is, what can we do? There is a kind of cascade, do you know that? Which is, what is your responsibility, first of all, to society, to the state, which is, you should do no evil. You should obey the law. So you had a guy, for example, AJ, recently on your excellent podcast, and the guy was saying, well, I see a red traffic light, I'm supposed to stop. Well, it doesn't apply to me. I don't see why, just because it's a red traffic light, I should stop, because I'll look left and look right. And if it's all clear, then I can go across. And occasionally I get held up by the state troopers. And actually, that's not what the law says. The law says, well, you think you can see what's coming from left and right, but maybe there's a pedestrian that you haven't spotted, and the light is green for them, and you pull your car out and you knock them down. That's why we've got laws. So you have a responsibility to obey the law, and that is, if you have to pay tax, you pay your tax. And obviously, you don't pay any unnecessary tax, and you are perfectly entitled to use whatever the law says to reduce your taxes. And that's at the level of the state. So that's at here. And then we go down. Let's say you're at work, and let's say you've got a boss. So how do you deal with your boss? And if your boss says, Kit, I want to reduce the quality of our product and maybe put in some really bad ingredients that's going to make people fat, or going to make them unhealthy, or going to give them, we're going to put in fillers as opposed to the high quality chocolate and so on. And we're going to give them stuff that's maybe trans fats or something or other that's going to make them sick. And you could argue with your boss, and you could say, boss, is this right? Should we really be doing this? Now that takes a lot of courage. And Again, one of your guests recently was talking about courage. Courage is a very difficult thing, particularly for people who are above you in the pecking order. So that then takes us to your work colleagues. I'm assuming, let's say you work in a company and you've got colleagues. Well, maybe you can sit and chat to them over the proverbial water cooler, and you chat about what the company is doing, and is the company behaving responsibility to its shareholders, of course, to the people who work in the business. Do they have enough rights? Are we treating people well? And what about the products we make? And you can have a conversation that can encourage them to think about the ethics of what that company is doing. And then you maybe AJ, you have subordinates. Maybe you have people that you are the boss of. And so you have the ability to say, I'm going to prioritize this particular project, and I'm going to spend less time on, we will spend less time working on that project, because you say the one will be beneficial to the company and to society, and the other one, well, that's a bit dodgy and I'm not sure we should be doing that. So you have power over it at work sometimes. And of course, people have different levels of power, don't they? So for example, if you were on your knees, AJ, cleaning a very fine marble staircase, and in a very big house, and you don't know whose house it is because you were employed by an agency that was in turn employed by another agency, and you think, I don't know who owns this house, I don't know what they do, I have no idea, and I've got 3 houses to clean every single day, and I can't afford, if I knew that the person who employed me was a bad person, I don't have the freedom to turn this job away, because I need this job because I've got to put food on the table for my children. So that, in that case, you don't have agency. And someone who's a boss in a big company, they do have agency, because they can say, we're going to do this thing that's good, or we're going to do this thing that's bad. So it depends on how much power you have. So yes, you have responsibility to the state. You can have conversations with your boss. You can talk to your work colleagues, and you can deal with your subordinates, the people that work for you. And then finally, you have responsibility to yourself and your family. And that's a matter of, when I get up in the morning and I look at myself in the mirror, am I doing the right thing? So those are the issues I think that every individual has to decide. And they have to decide their culpability as well, AJ. How culpable are you? We talked about the cleaner cleaning that marble staircase, but maybe you have got more agency. So I would say there's 2 things. First of all, who am I working for? Am I working for a bad organization, or does my work involve? Yeah. Do I work for an oil company that's polluting the planet and creating climate change, for example? Or maybe I work for a charity. Even charities sometimes are not great. Sometimes they don't not enough money goes into actually helping the people that they're supposed to be helping. And then there is a question of, what is my particular job? Do I have power to create change? Am I that lawyer who's sitting in an office in Barbados helping the rich to avoid paying their taxes, or whispering in the ears of politicians and the things I shouldn't be doing? You look at yourself in the mirror, you should say to yourself, am I doing the right thing, AJ? Yeah.
Absolutely. Am I doing the right thing?
Yeah.
Do you think we have hope from the new generation that they are looking at things differently, that they want things differently, that they want to experience the world, do not tied to be to an office chair? The great resignation was also perhaps the precursor to what they want. Do you think they want to create the world in the way they want the new world to live in? Do you think old structures are collapsing?
Yeah.
Do you think these ultra rich are fearful at this point in time? And that is where a lot of discord is also happening.
Absolutely. I think the younger generations are so much better than the older generations were, and I include myself as being in the older generation. They are much more aware of what is right and what is wrong. What I would say, though, is yes, they can do the great resignation, but they don't necessarily recognize the power structure where social influence happens, as you've said. And that, I think, is why we really need to think about the concierge class and about the unfairness, the inequality that's growing. You need to understand how the world works, and then you can understand, what you can do about it. But if you don't know that, then what can you do? You can just resign, but that won't really resolve anything. Are the old power structures failing? I think democracy is failing. Liberal democracy is at great risk from the ultra rich and the corporations who have so much more power now than they had 20 years ago. And can the younger people do anything about this? Well, the future is theirs. It's not mine, AJ, and it's not yours. It is our children and our grandchildren. And so we have a responsibility for helping them to understand how the world works. And yes, people need to keep their money, understand that they need to work. They want to work hard. Everyone wants to work hard. Everyone wants to feed their family. But we have a responsibility to society as well. And I don't think that there is much evidence that the world is changing except for the worse. And who knows what the future will bring? I don't know.
Can you look into the future a bit, Kit, and see how the world will look, say, from 5 years down the line? Will the dollar exist? Will the so many rich people, you see, as I talked about Facebook bringing in bots now because there won't be enough creators that time, and they will perhaps look at life differently. How do you see the world in the next 5 years? Not a better world, but something of a better pushback from people who actually are, who want the world to be a better place.
There is a section in my book, AJ, where I talk about the pitchforks coming for the rich. And I didn't create this word. This is actually written by a multimillionaire. And he says, I've got so much money. But actually, we, the multimillionaires, have to be very careful because the pitchforks may be coming for us and the burning torches to burn our houses down. There's a lot of anger and angry people out there. So I think it could go so many ways. I think there was a pendulum, AJ. Things swing backwards and forwards. Sometimes society says we need to give more freedom to people to create new jobs and so on. And other times we move the other way and we say we have to support community and make the world a fairer place. Every country seems to be at a different stage of development. We've seen Donald Trump taking over in America because people said liberal democracy is not working. And in India, for example, Narendra Modi he's a strong man and he's done a lot of good things for India, but also too sometimes strong men foster anger by creating anger and fear in communities. So in India, the trouble of attacks sometimes on Muslims. We need to be able to work together and live together. And sometimes people in power encourage us to be fearful and angry because it suits their purposes. So I have no idea. I think different countries will move at different places, different pace. And I think that people will eventually realize that the things that people like Elon Musk are saying are not necessarily going to solve our problems, and we have to go back to being kinder. But how long that will take, I don't know. What do you think, AJ?
I don't know. My job is to watch and keep on asking questions, whether they are suppliers, whether they are magicians, whether they are authors, whether they're experts, whether they are any of those ultra rich. But my job is to keep on asking questions. I will continue asking questions as long as I can hope that much of liberty will, the society, the constitution, the humanity will always allow to people who have a voice, who want to ask questions, because these are not my questions. I ask for those who voices need to be heard. So
Yeah.
for a lot of people who would want to know more about you, get in connect with you, get your hold of your book, what is the best way for them to do so?
Thank you, AJ. So if your listeners were to go to my name, you can see in the screen kitsadgrove.org, kitsadgrove.org. So they will find more information about the book, and it would be lovely if they wanted to buy a copy or tell their friends about it, or indeed just have a conversation. And even more importantly, I would love for them to get in touch with me to tell me, are they a member of the concierge class? Do they feel that there is anything they can do? Do they have any power? Do they have any solutions to this? And then I would be more than pleased to tell you afterwards, AJ, what people have said to me and the conversations perhaps we've had.
Wonderful. With this, it's a wrap on this very special edition of the KJ Masterclass Live. Thank you so much indeed for joining us.
It's been a privilege, AJ.